Welcome to Sunday Coffee. It's good to be with you. If you're new here, Sunday Coffee is where I roll out of bed, I'm in my jams, and yes, this is a sweatshirt because it's 51 degrees here in New Hampshire, and we can chat with each other. So that's very nice. And most of us aren't getting up as early as I get up, which is totally fine. So you can watch the recording. So that's kind of good. And right now, the conversation that I have invited us to have is this irony of reaching for balance. And a lot of people are like, why is that ironic? Well, the reason it's ironic is when we reach for things, we tend to lose our balance. And when it comes to food and eating, a balanced diet doesn't look like a yoga pose. So, how do we find the difference? If you're new here, my name is Megrette. I'm a weight inclusive registered dietitian, diabetes educator, and I'm the author of No Weight Loss Required. So grab your coffee or tea or whatever you want to drink, and let's kind of chat. So I always like to begin with understanding a couple of things. And the first thing that I want to just explain is No Weight Loss Required uses what I call the No Weight Loss Required roadmap. And that's 4 steps that we go through. And we're right now on step 1, which is adding to your diet. So, how do we add to achieve balance? And that's because the food math doesn't math. You cannot subtract infinitely. And so, in this step, we're really trying to look and say, what does balance look like? How can I add balance? And we've already talked about adding protein to the diet and what that would look like as a balanced day or meal. We talked about adding carbohydrates, and I know that carbohydrates, I always say if protein has a halo, carbohydrates have horns. So we've talked about that. We've also talked about fat, and I've called out specifically saturated fat in that because of heart disease. So just trying to understand, we want to add fats that are not associated with heart disease and be aware that some fats are associated with heart disease. And in 2 weeks, we're gonna wrap up the series as we talk about fiber. So all of these episodes, we're asking one question: what could I add to a meal to make it more balanced? And there is a question that's underneath all of that, so you're like, oh, what could I add to make this more balanced? And that underneath question is, what does balance mean if we're not striving, if we're not looking for a very specific outcome? And that specific outcome is really about diet culture. And diet culture has been so integrated into the medical community, weight loss is always kind of the default. And this newsletter is trying to untangle that default. So we're always defaulting to say, well, if I do X, I'll lose weight. If I do Y, I'll lose weight. And I'm here just to point out that that's just another form of striving. It's another way to get out of balance. And, this, we'll go in a little bit deeper as to kind of that whole experience. But when we're trying to step out of, we're trying to figure out what does balance mean, um, when we're trying to prevent or manage diabetes, what does it mean when we're trying to move our body? What does it mean when we're trying to eat a balanced diet? And this unspoken question of why would I bother doing that? The why is important. Your why is important. And, what do I get? That question drives the striving. Well, why would I do that? What would I get? If I just do X, what will I get? If I just do Y, what will I get? If I'm consistent, then I'll get Z, this whole idea of, if I could just do this thing, then I'd get that. And you can see how transactional that conversation is right now. And one of the things that's really hard when we talk about balance is where we're stepping away from these transactional relationships. Your body is not a transaction. It's your body. It's the place you live every day, every night, every minute. And so when we look at nourishing our body as a transaction, it gets really sticky. Maybe I don't want to pay. And then all of a sudden we start realizing that our relationship with food is tied up into this what do I get mentality. And, diet culture really believes and wants you to believe that balance is something that you earn and that you need to strive. And there's always the right that's out there. If I just do it this way, then I'll be good enough. Then it will be right. Then I could get X. Then I could do Y. If I was consistent, then I'd be Z. And finding this elusive balance, yeah. Well, then you can check it off and you're done, right? Because once you've been in balance, you're like, I've done it. Next. We're not living in balance. We're experiencing the sense of balance that's very fleeting. And this is kind of this process of slowing down to turn around and say, wait a second, does anyone know when I'm in balance? There is someone who knows, but it's not Bob. And for those who have never watched one of my videos, Bob is the fictitious person that I pick on, and Bob typically represents diet culture. So the only person who knows they're in balance is you. And in our go, go, go world, in our very transactional world, in our very transactional healthcare system, it takes a while to understand if you're in balance. I don't understand when I'm in balance. A lot of times I'm like, I'm in balance. I feel like I'm in balance. And then, I slow down and I meditate every day and I journal every day. And those are tools that I use to say, am I in balance? In No Weight Loss Required. And I will try to remember to put a link there. Let me write that down. I taught, I write about something called a thought compass. And just as an aside, a thought compass is a tool. It's a very small mini mind map. And it just helps us understand if I put something in the center, what radiates out of that center. And if we're neurodiverse, I'm neurodiverse, I have ADHD, and that really helps me see the connections and organize because I do get overwhelmed and I do shut down and I really need to slow down to know what my direct experience is. And that process of slowing down, that's the practice of slowing down and saying, am I in balance? And balance can be reaching, but it doesn't have to be. For most of us, balance isn't familiar, and that's something to notice. So we practice noticing, oh, this feels balanced. We're practicing noticing that because the force of familiar, and again, the force of familiar is pulling you back to what you've done. So if it's familiar to be out of balance, that's going to feel normal. And when we're not used to being in balance, that's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel unfamiliar. And so the shift is really turning around and saying, am I in balance, or is this experience familiar and therefore the status quo feels like balance? I know. And that's the shift that we're really trying to make. When you're looking at your diet and you're saying, what would make this meal, this day, feel more balanced? And we're talking about adding. What can you add to make something feel more balanced? It takes effort. It takes time. And so this idea of cutting things away, it doesn't take time. It's easy to cut things out. I just won't do that. And now you have more time. But not doing that doesn't create balance. It creates restriction. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not allowed. And you can just feel how the diet is telling you what to do. You're not telling yourself. You're not guiding your own experience. The diet is. And so this is kind of part of this whole process, which is if you've never checked in before to say, hey, am I feeling balanced here? It's going to feel unfamiliar. And it can generate a lot of questions, which, as an aside, is a good sign. Which by nature is, you're facing your doubts, you're facing your, like, I'm not really sure. And again, another good sign. I really want to normalize not knowing. Honestly, no one can know everything. So these people that are like, I know when I'm perfectly in balance, I'm like, happy for you, Bob. But the rest of us mere mortals don't. We're always kind of engaging in this experiment to say, I don't know, is it balanced now? And this is where this pausing and checking in, checking in, checking in. We're not counting. We're not weighing. We're checking in and we're saying, I don't know, does this feel balanced? Now, I love experiments. I love doing experiments. I'm like kind of nerdy that way. But it's fun for me to say, I'm going to make this meal and maybe I'll do an experiment and I'll measure things because it's easy to forget what a half a cup or a cup looks like. So I'll measure things and I'll eat it and I'll say, did I feel in balance? And if the answer is yes, I'll go like, oh, that's good to know. And if the answer is no, I'm like, what could I add to this to make myself feel like I'm in balance? I'm in charge. The diet's not. And I'm just trying to get a sense, like, if I don't know how much I had, I'm probably not going to be able to recreate the experiment. So we're measuring, we're being aware of our diet, we're adding to it to learn, not to do. You're not performing. You're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for Bob. You're doing it for you. So the why is so I know what balance feels like. And I'm creating these little experiments so I know what does balance feel like. And I have laid out mathematically what balance looks like. So this is a good time for me to relate everything to baseball. I'm a big baseball fan. I love baseball. And if you're reading this newsletter, it's like reading a book about baseball. Yeah, Major League Baseball is not probably going to call you up and say, oh my gosh, can you play on our team? Because you read a book about baseball. They're not. If you watched a baseball game and you're like, oh, I watched a baseball game, Major League Baseball is probably not going to go like, oh my gosh, you read a book and watched a baseball game. That's amazing. If you meet with me one-on-one, now you have a coach. Again, Major League Baseball is not going to call you up and go, oh my gosh, you read a book, you watched a game, you have a coach. I want you to play on my team. What allows someone to be good at playing baseball is playing baseball. And one of the things I love about baseball is they make a lot of mistakes. They do. They strike out. I mean, if you can hit a ball 3 times out of 10 pitches, so 3 times at bat, you hit the ball 3 times, you are in the Hall of Fame. And it's not like, oh, good on you. Hall of Fame. Most people only hit 2, and they're considered a solid player. I know. Crazy. So diet culture has these standards that are here, and if we bring them down to kind of baseball level, you're going to eat 10 meals. Like if 3 of those, you're like, yes, Hall of Fame. But the more you practice, the more you're going to know what feels in balance for my body. And the idea is this checking in. So when do we check in? When do I turn around and say, like, what would help me feel in balance? What does my body need right now? What could I add to this meal so I feel in balance? And when you do that, when you're like, yeah, I feel in balance, you know, you're turning around doing that before eating. So that's when you're practicing. And that's where the mindful eating comes in. If you turn around and you say to yourself, like, oh, when could I check in? Before meals. So if you eat 3 meals a day, that's 1,092 times. It's a lot of practice. Yay. And if you check in before and after a meal, you know, my math isn't that great, but it's like 2,184 times. You know, and if you check in before, during, and after, if you check in when you're cooking, if you just like anytime you're around food or eating and you're checking in saying like, what would help my body feel balanced? All of a sudden you are doing a lot of practice. And yes, Major League Baseball is going to call. It's so true. Like, no, I lied. But that's kind of what we have is that you're turning around saying, in the beginning, checking in is unfamiliar, but if I practice, it's going to become familiar. And you're breaking the force of familiar because you're asking a question. Compassionate curiosity is what cuts the thread of familiar. And I know I say that a lot, but a lot of times we think, well, I didn't eat the right thing. And I'm like, not compassionate. Well, I wasn't in balance when I was done. Normal. But how can we learn from that experience? And that's really, when we think about baseball players, that's what we want. They're always learning how to hit better, how to feel better, how to play on the team better. And they're always learning how to advance their skill. Practicing, learning, it's a skill. It's not an outcome. And if a Major League Baseball player has a really good practice, it doesn't mean that they're going to have a great game. So if we're always focused in on, you know, scoring the run, if we're always focused in on losing the weight, then your focus isn't on the skill of checking in. Your focus is on the outcome. And that can make us feel really out of balance because when we get to the plate, we're like, I don't know, I'm not sure if I can hit the ball. And we can see the anxiety. And then now we're out of balance. So that checking in, that pause, is actually going deeper. It's not reaching. It's turning around and centering ourselves. And that's how we find balance. Pause before a meal. Pause during a meal. Just pause and check in and say, what do I need? What would help me feel in balance? What would help me feel okay? And that pausing is, you know, it's just so helpful to turn around and, um, practice. It's the practice, it's the skill. And the more we check in, which is very unfamiliar when we're used to dieting, the diet is the one telling you you did it right. The diet is the one telling you you're good. The diet and the scale, oh, you did it right because you lost weight. And we're trying to push back from that. We're trying to turn around and say, let's get back to center. And centering a lot of times is going deeper. It's not reaching. It's not reaching out here. It's centering. Very curious how this landed for you. Please feel free to add to the comments. It was lovely being with you this Sunday. I hope the rest of your week is wonderful. Take care, everyone.